Directors, and I'd like to welcome everybody here to the 5th annual meeting of the owners of the Assabet Village Co-op Market. All right, sorry, I'll start again. I'm Tom Green, I'm a member of the Board of Directors, and I'd like to welcome everybody here to the 5th annual meeting of the members of the Assabet Village Co-op Market. So today is the day that we get to all participate in the democratic process, and the main thing that we're here today is to get an update on the status of the co-op. I believe that this year is probably the last year that we're going to be able to fit in this size of the room here. I think that we may need to expand the entire top floor of the Elks here. I hope everybody had a chance to take some of the great food and coffee that was provided by a number of great vendors. They're all listed here in the back of the program. And without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our Director of Communications and Outreach, Lauren Bell.
Hi everybody, welcome. Before I get started with this, I just wanted to again thank all of these food sponsors and maybe preempt that with an apology. Until yesterday, we had only 115 or so folks respond yes, and then we had about 40 people in the last couple of days, which is great, respond yes to the event. And so we're a little scarce. There's still a lot of sweets left there, and would have liked to have more gluten-free options, but gluten-free salad, and next year we'll do a little bit better at that. But Concord Tea Cakes, Serendipity, the Compulsive Baker, and Susan Counter-Zibby is here, makes delicious baked goods, and is every year at the Farmers Market in Maynard. Union Coffee Roaster from Air is a new partner of ours, and a fantastic local coffee roaster, sourcing all sustainably harvested coffee. So check them out if you haven't already. Hope Coffee in Concord, and the Bolton Bean, which provided sandwiches, which are gone. So I hope you enjoy them. I also wanted to thank our volunteers. Without, year-round, without the help of all of our fantastic volunteers, there are too many to name, and there are at least a half dozen or more here in the room today. Thank you all for making this possible, and for making this co-op possible, because without you, we wouldn't. Just another couple quick notes before we get into this. Number one, we have beautiful new lawn signs, which you probably saw coming in, and yes, we have the stakes back there too. They're $15. If you have one of those original ones, which I had, and had taken a beating over several winters, feel free at the end of the presentation to go back and purchase a lawn sign. They're beautiful. We have plenty of tote bags as well. Got a whole new shipment of those, so and they're great. And it's great advertising for the co-op too, and turns people on. They ask, "What is that?" when you bring it into unsaid conventional grocery stores out there. And then I have a bunch of extra brochures back there as well. I meant to bring some sticky notes. If you have a friend or neighbor who you think would really dig the co-op, it's a great thing to do, to just grab a sticky note, put it on one of those brochures, and write, "Hey, check this out, Cindy," or whomever, and put it in their mailbox. If you want to, feel free. Plenty of brochures back there. Okay. Yeah. Let's get right into this. I'm just going to present quickly here, and then I'll be back later to get into some other initiatives. But wanted to give you a quick update on our progress, news, owner growth, all that sort of stuff. This is one owner short. No, I didn't mention. In the past 2 days, I think we've had 4 or 5 new owners join. So 1,033 owners now, as of last night at 10 o'clock something, and owner 1,033 is here. There he is. From 42 towns, and I believe this is 42 towns in Massachusetts, and then we have a handful of towns outside of the state, as far away as Texas and New York, and actually Seattle was the farthest out. Yeah, maybe. Just kind of a refresher why we're doing this, and we're kind of trying to get back to the roots here of what we're doing as we continue this ongoing search for a site. We operate according to the 7 cooperative principles, which go back more than 100 years. But some of the more kind of, energetic, passionate, go-get-em kind of principles, autonomy and independence, right? This is our food. These are our families that we're feeding this food to. We want to know that it's grown in sustainable ways. We want to know exactly who's growing it and how they're growing it. And we want control, right? We're tired in some sense of having the control over our basic commodity food treated as a commodity instead of what it is. It's sustenance for us and our families. So we're taking that control back and we're having that independence and autonomy. Democratic member control, you're going to exercise some of that today in voting for some fantastic new board members and incumbents. Vote with pride. That is your right in owning this co-op. And concern for community. And this stretches across a range of issues, but supporting local farms, of course, greater access to healthy food for all, and we'll get into one of those initiatives today to really make this tent as big as we possibly can. Reducing our carbon footprint, of course, right? And all of you know, a lot of you signed up for this reason. If not the economy, the environment. If not the environment, our community. But buying food that comes from down the road means that you are not contributing to fuel for trucks, packaging, refrigeration, all of that that happens with food that comes from across the country or across the world. Of course, a thriving local economy. We know that these co-ops build thriving local economies. They buoy other businesses around them through recession after recession, and there's no better incentive to shop there than actually going to the store. Thank you. And so elections, Democratic member control, right? This is one of the basic principles. It's election season at the co-op, and unless you've been living under a rock, it's election season in our country, so I would urge you, of course, after voting today, Tuesday, get out there and vote. If you haven't done early voting already, it's your voice, it's your country, it's your community. If you don't vote, what's the good in having a voice, right? So same here, but of course, vote on Tuesday too, if you can, please. We have 2 incumbents, fantastic board members running today, and 3 nominees. Their profiles are in your agendas. If you haven't already taken a look at them online or on Facebook or through a MailChimp blast, we covered all the bases here. So they're also in the agendas, and they're also in the room. So if at some point today you get a chance, tap them on the shoulder, talk to them about why they joined the co-op and why they want to run. It's all written out there, but it's nice to make that connection. And after today's vote, we will have a full 9-member board, which is pretty impressive. That's as big as we get. And it's good, because the more folks that are on the board, the more representation there is out there from you guys. So it is, I will make this note, it's uncontested. That fills the board. We don't have 10 folks running for 9 spots. But still, this is your vote, and you want to support who you want to support. Yes?
Everybody stand up, the people that want to be on the board?
Sure, yeah. Can all the incumbents, and actually, how about the whole board? Is that all right? Yeah. Yep, and the whole board stand up. And these are the folks that behind the scenes, and we're going to go through it when we go through the store site search stuff today. These are the folks who are working day in, day out, in addition to their day jobs, to open our store. And they work tirelessly. Thank you, guys. Yep. So the latest news, the site search. You're going to get more on that in a bit. Right after you vote midway through the presentation, we will get into the site search stuff. But 12 sites have been eliminated over the past 10 months. We're going to get into the ins and outs of why and go over again the criteria in terms of what we're looking for. There is still a prospect that remains in Maynard. So we are not out of options in Maynard, and at this rate, if you figure 12 sites or more, and we've really looked at more than that, but officially looked at 12 sites in the past 10 months, every month or so, a new site tends to pop up. So the options are still coming out, but we do, that's where we're at. We are down to 1 at this point. Owner growth, 192, that's more like 195 or 96 at this point, owners since the last annual meeting, which is great growth. It's not the 350 or so that we had the previous year, but it's pretty expected. Once you reach that 900 owner plateau, until you announce that location, it tends to slow down a bit, but we've still been going, I guess you could call it gangbusters, but still been going pretty good over the last 10 months or so, or 12 months. Policy register has been completed, and if that this is the way that the co-op runs, and this is a huge effort by the board to complete this policy register, and it basically is how the co-op is governed and operated. So that is a precursor, a necessary step before we can hire a general manager. So getting that completed was a huge effort on the part of the board, and that is done. So that is certainly a big piece of news coming out of the last 10 months or so, 12 months since the last annual meeting. Upcoming events. We've got some really cool upcoming events. I hope that you guys will come. These are open, of course, to owners and non-owners. If you are an owner and you're coming, please bring a non-owner friend. Not only because it's a fun thing to do, they're fun events, but also it's a great way to expose new people to what the co-op is all about. And we love to meet new people who are interested in local food and that kind of thing. On December 6th, we have a free documentary coming up at Fine Arts Theater Place. That free documentary is made free thanks to our fantastic sponsors, Revolution Yoga, In Situ Architects, and what's the third one? I'll remember it. Gallery 7, of course, Gallery 7, framing in Maynard. It is a food justice film by the producers of Food Inc., and it's free. All that we ask is that you RSVP for it. It's on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook, you can send me an email or info@assabetvillage.coop or co-op so that I know that you're coming. We've got a limit, and I think right now we're up to 20 people who are coming in. I think it's 65 people the theater can hold. And that's at Fine Arts Theater Place on December 6th. It's a Thursday night at 7. December 8th, we just booked this, a coffee roasting and tasting tour at Karma Coffee in Sudbury. Karma is another fantastic local roaster, and they are hosting us for a roasting tour and a tasting tour. So if you can, definitely sign up for that. Those are paid tickets for that one, but you can find the link on Facebook or on our webpage. December 9th, we have a cozy co-op gathering. We had these last winter, and they're fantastic. These are very laid-back and fun events. If you haven't hosted one and you want to, please let me know. They're very easy for you. Basically, you just pour some hot cocoa or some wine or whatever your drink of choice is. I bring locally baked treats and all the co-op info, and I'll even help with invites. I've got a template for invites, and they're really fun. You invite friends and neighbors to learn about the co-op. They can take info with them, or they can become owners on the spot. And this is a private party hosted in Bolton by one of our board members. So that'll be a lot of fun. This we just added to December 15th, Brews, News, and FAQs, 2, because we've done one of these before, at Medusa Brewing. This is just an opportunity to come out. It's right holiday season, so if you're doing your holiday shopping, this one's from 12:30 to 3:30. So and it's Medusa is a bring your own food, so you can order in food from any of the cool restaurants in Hudson and just come hang with us. And the beer isn't free, but it's delicious, and we have our own room reserved there. And again, if you have any non-owner friends, please bring them along. It's a great opportunity to have good beer and schmooze about the co-op and get all your questions answered. And then January 12th, we're tabling at the opening day of Wayland Winter Farmers Market. If you have never been to Wayland Winter Farmers Market, it is the best around. There's no better winter farmers market around. It is fantastic. Please come out and visit our table, but just enjoy more than 60 vendors, everything from prepared foods to frozen foods to fresh winter root vegetables, and it's fantastic.
Where is the Wayland Market located?
It's at Russell's Garden Center. Yep. Bigger than their summer one, strangely, but it's fantastic. It's really popular. Are we at the net? What are we at? Aha. Just a reminder for you of where we are in this process. Some of you have seen this ad nauseum, so I'm not going to get into it too much, but we follow the Grow, Fund, Build process for opening a food co-op. It's a proven process to open thriving food co-ops that stick around rather than just opening and closing a year later. It is an arduous process, but we want the most sustainable co-op that we can build. And so we have, I think last year when I was up here, I was saying we had 841 owners. We now have 1,033. So we have passed the point where we can sign on a place, which means we are actively, and have been for about 10 months now, exploring locations. But we are at the point where we could sign that lease contingency or purchase contingency and then start our capital campaign. So that's where we're at right now. That capital campaign, this number depends, this 1.2 million depends in large part on the location that we find, what kind of renovations it needs and all that, but that's an approximate. It takes about 4 to 6 months to complete that capital campaign. We will be trained by experts in the co-op community to execute a quick, effective capital campaign, and then we build. And of course that build, depending on whether it's a new construction or renovation, can take some time too. But we are at the tail end, this is what I tell folks because it's true, of what on average is a 5 to 8 year startup process. So if you're joining now, joining at a great time, you don't have to be as patient as owner 143 or owner 1 or any of those. So, cool. I think that's it for me for now. Oh, this is another member growth chart. This is kind of, we saw steep incline in growth the previous year. It has leveled out a bit, but we're still, that's good direction to be headed in. We have 1,200 on here, and we'll show this later, because 1,200 is a good number to be at when we launch the capital campaign. Because this is entirely community driven, the more owners we have who potentially contribute to the capital campaign, the faster and more effective the capital campaign. So 1,200 is kind of that golden number, but we're moving in that direction, so that's good. Okay, I think I am going to turn it now over to Jason to give you the financial report.
Jason. What? Can you just move that way? Thank you. It's easier to keep you and the projector on camera that way. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as I'm sure all of you recall, in our bylaws, we need to report all of our financial statements on an annual basis within 6 months of the close of the fiscal year. And our fiscal year runs July 1 to June 30. So I'm going to run through just a quick summary of where we are, as I'm obligated to do. I asked Siobhan to print out some copies of our income statement and balance sheet. So we have some in the back, and usually there's not too many people interested in the paper copies. Anyone can, of course, feel free to email us. We've got PDFs. We're happy to share them, of course, because we wouldn't be anywhere without all our owners. So this kind of sums up our balance sheet, where we were, end of the fiscal year. As you can see, our owner equity has increased a little bit. Certainly, we've got a lot more owners. You'll see, I think, on the next slide where we've been spending this money, but we've been relatively stable over the past year in terms of our the money that we have and the money that we've been spending. All right, so this is just a quick. Oh, I gotta stand over here.
No, you're fine.
This is just a high-level summary of our profit and loss statement. And the key point that I'd like to emphasize here is that this is pretty much what we were expecting. The big net operating income, it's because we basically don't have income. Owner equity doesn't count as income. That's our equity. So we're not yet an operational store. We had total revenue of just under $2,000 this year. And that comes from, miscellaneous contributions, events, the coffee roasting tours, lawn signs, tote bags, miscellaneous stuff like that. So our expenses is obviously high. Our single biggest expense is our one employee, Lauren. He does a great job. But we pay him fairly and reasonably, and Lauren does a great job for us. Some of the differences is that the previous fiscal year, Lauren started January 1st, 2017. So that previous year was only a half year of employee salaries. Some of the other big expenses that we had is that every potential site that we were evaluating, after we did the initial pass and okay, it seems reasonable, we want to pursue it a little bit more, we paid for market study updates because we needed, specific financial forecasts for each potential location, and then based on that we could decide whether or not it's really worth pursuing or extending. So that was another significant expense over the past year. So that's basically it for the financials. Like I said, feel free to come up to me with any specific questions. We've got paper copies of our financial statements, and feel free to email me if you'd like them electronically. What's next on the agenda? Let's vote.
Nomi, my name is Siobhan Mitchell, and I'm your current board president. Thank you all for coming. I think we beat last year's numbers. Last year we had the most attendees at our annual meeting. We had 112 people last year, and I think we beat that this year, so that's really exciting. And before I start, I also just want to thank the 3 nominees that we have that y'all just voted on, Dan and Nancy and Anne Marie. Super grateful to them for stepping up. There's a lot of work to do, and they are up for doing the work. And I think it's going to be a really good group of people next year, and I'm just very excited for what the board's going to be like. Yeah, so this is my slide. So once again, Lauren has said some of my lines. I think he did this to me last year as well. So this is maybe the not so fun part of the annual meeting. So let me tell you how this is going to go. Okay. I do not want to get stuck in the weeds. I do not want to get into all the nitty-gritty details of every single site. And I certainly am not up here to disparage any of these property owners. With a lot of these sites, we had very friendly, very professional conversations and developing relationships, okay? So I just want to make that clear. Really, the reason that we're doing this, most startups don't come to their annual meetings and talk about all the sites that they're not gonna go into. It's fairly unusual. But most startups don't eliminate 12 sites. So the big picture of what we want to communicate to you is really the amount of work that's been done, right? We've been hearing over the last couple of months that hasn't really been a lot of communication about the site search, and that's true, and that's our fault, and so for that we apologize. We were up here last year at the annual meeting talking about how we weren't going to talk about the site search, right? And there are really good reasons why we don't talk about sites that we're exploring, okay? Co-ops have gotten themselves into trouble before, properties have been purchased out from underneath them, or rates have mysteriously, started to wiggle a little bit higher. And then obviously we also don't want anybody's hopes we don't want to get your hopes up, right? So our policy has been, rightly so, not to talk about the sites that we've been exploring. But since we've explored a whole bunch of sites and we haven't landed on one yet, that has resulted in not a lot of communication to you all. So again, for that, my apologies. So we are doing the unusual thing of, my job, is to stand up here and talk about where we're not going to go and why. So I just do want to review the search criteria. So we are looking for approximately 7,500 square feet total. That gets us a very sweet little store, right? That gets us enough square footage where we can have prepared foods and a nice bulk section, right? Produce, all the things that we've all been talking about wanting all of these years, okay? 7,500 square feet gets us there. This slide says 40 to 50 parking spaces. I think typically when we talk about parking, we usually use the figure 25 to 35, and that's true for customer parking. We also need about 15 employee parking spaces, so if we wind up in a spot where our employees can park off-site, then we only need 25 to 35 customer spots. A minimum of 25 of those, we do want those to be dedicated spots though, and that's part of why our site selection process is so tricky. We can land on the lower end if there is immediately adjacent other parking that is not dedicated, but if it's a site with a self-contained parking lot, then ideally we'd like it to be 35 or 50 if our employees are also going to park on that site. We need a loading dock because some of the things that we sell are going to come off the UNFI truck. We need to be able to get that truck in and out. Traffic flow. So when we get to maturity, we have 1,000 owners now. Not all of you are going to shop at the store. I certainly don't expect the owner from Seattle to shop every week. But a co-op that's doing a good job being present in the community, about 50% of its sales come from owners, okay? And then also approximately 50% of your owners will be regular weekly shoppers. So as we get towards maturity, we will be bringing 2,000 cars in a week. Wow. Okay? So we need to be able to get those cars in and out, right? We want it to be a fairly pleasant experience. Visibility, it'd be nice to be visible. Intangibles, this is a great kind of catch-all category for a lot of things that are actually really important. The sales forecast, cost per square foot, structural issues, meaning how much would it cost us to improve that property and turn it into our store. Zoning, and then environmental permitting, okay? So that's the criteria that we use. So let's talk about the sites. Site number 1 is Walgreens in downtown Maynard. And many of you may know, Emerson Hospital has now signed a lease with that property. I think it was just in the Beacon Villager recently, that they're going to be putting medical offices there. This property has been vacant for a long time and has been on our radar since the very beginning. And again, not to disparage anybody or get stuck in the weeds, but we actually tried several times over the course of several years to get into that property, and they were never willing to let us in the door. They never even let us in unless we were willing to agree to rent both floors, which is twice as much as we need, at a very high per square foot rate, more than we could afford, right? They had a lease that with Walgreens, that Walgreens was continuing to pay them. And so they really had no incentive. They had no motive to get another tenant in there, and certainly not a tenant that was going to pay less than what Walgreens was paying. So that was Walgreens. So 39-43 Main Street is a site that we looked at. The owner of that building, and see if I can describe it. The building in Maynard that used to be the Abishans Hardware, the building itself actually was configured kind of, it looked like a number 4, and it was actually 2 buildings that were separated by a little connector. And that connector got torn down, And now one half of the old Abishans is open table. And the owner of the other half actually contacted us. And we did look at it, and the square footage, there wasn't really enough space to put a building there for us. And then there was no dedicated parking. They couldn't do a building and dedicated parking, okay? So again, we can land on the low side of parking if there's additional adjacent parking, but we can't have all of our parking just be in the bowl, not dedicated and have it be metered, and that's not gonna work. Bank of America, we actually did tour that building. We met with the owners, and we did look at it. So with Bank of America, it's 2 floors. And for us, the square footage was wrong, okay? We could have some backstock. We could certainly have our community space be on a different level. But we need to have a minimum number of square feet contiguous, right? Because when we talk about retail square feet, we don't include in that square footage the refrigerators or the behind the counter, right? So all told, we actually need a minimum of 6,500 square feet in a single footprint, right? And then the other 1,000 could potentially be somewhere else. And the Bank of America, that first floor is only 5,700. So that wasn't gonna work for our needs. Gruber Brothers. A lot of people have asked us about Gruber Brothers. We did walk through that property. We did that with a developer. Back when it was Joel Gruber who owned it. It has now since been sold twice, actually. There was a couple that bought it from Joel, and then they turned around and sold it to Jimmy McDonald, who now owns it. There were quite a number of issues with this property, and it turns out, if you don't know, that's actually not a historic building. It's not the original building. The original building burned down, and this building was constructed in its place, and it was designed to look like the original building. But the building itself needed some work, shall we say. Again, I don't. And then also with Gruber Brothers, there actually were several other issues as well. Not the least of which is traffic flow. CVS owns the parking spaces on both sides of that driveway. So the lot, Gruber's actual lot, is actually very small. It just goes to the retaining wall. It doesn't include any of those parking spaces. The lovely structure behind Gruber's that has the mural, shall we say, is actually not entirely contained in that property. So the property line is actually even a little bit in from the back of that structure. And getting 2,000 cars a week in and out of the CVS parking lot is not going to work. If you've been there, it's already challenging to get in and out, right? What's next? Rockland Ave. So for those of you who don't know where Rockland Ave is, and I imagine many of you do not, so that says something right there. Rockland Ave is off of Route 27. If you head north out of Maynard, right where Christmas Motors is on the right, there's a left-hand turn, and I don't know the name of that road, I apologize. Oh yes, so that's Acton Street, thank you. It's right there. And then Rockland Ave is that first right-hand turn off of Acton Street. there are soccer fields down there that the town uses, and the town has one of its wells, one of its pumps, is on Rockland Ave as well. And they own a parcel of land that is currently undeveloped. And so they had suggested to us that we consider it. And so we had a conversation with our market study analyst who said not to pay for a sales forecast for that site, that it was really going to be a non-starter. The Elks Lodge, and I don't know if anybody is here from the Elks right now, but if you are, I don't want to give you a heart attack. But the reason that the Elks is on the list is because it was suggested to us that because they have this giant parking lot that you guys are all parked in right now. We looked at this property. We did not reach out to the owners of this property, again, because the whole parking lot is in a flood zone, and it's covered by the Rivers Protection Act. And then again, getting in and out of here is not particularly fun either, right? Sudbury Upper Lot, that's at the mill. So for those of you familiar with the mill, across from St. Bridget's and where Battle Road, the entrance to Battle Road is, that's a giant parking lot. That is the Sudbury Street, that is the lower parking lot. And coming off of Sudbury Street, you can actually kind of turn right and go up a small hill. That is the Sudbury Street upper lot. And we spoke to the mill owners. We spoke to all the different mill owners over a number of years, back when it was Joe Mullen. We talked to Joe Mullen. And then after Saracen Properties bought the mill, we talked to Saracen. And we've now more recently spoken with the current management company. And they are not interested in developing that upper lot. They may get to it someday. Someday could be very far away. And my understanding is that they will probably do housing up there. There's issues with the way it's zoned. We don't, but if they're not willing to let us talk about it, then there's no reason to talk about this one. The Imago School. Again, if there's anybody here who has a child at the Imago School, do not have a heart attack. The Imago School is not closing. So at one point, the Archdiocese was considering selling that property. Was that a gasp?
Yes. Is that on Summer Street?
That is on Sudbury Street.
Sudbury Percival. Yeah.
Sudbury Percival Street. I would love that property. It's bigger than we need. We could have a store, we could have parking, we could have a loading dock, we could have all kinds of things. Easy access. So we have inquired with the Archdiocese through one of the town administrators a couple different times. And the answer has come back that they're not interested in selling it right now. 129 Parker Street. That has actually also been on our radar for a number of years. And if you're familiar with the history of that project, you know that the development has been somewhat contentious. So the people who are developing this property, Capital Group, they have an approved concept plan. They had to go to town meeting in Maynard. Many of you may have been there. They had to go to town meeting and get it approved. And that concept plan shows a 65,000 square foot, 68 68,000 square foot supermarket. And we are not going to be 68,000 square feet.
Yet.
Yet, I heard that. Thank you. And they basically they don't want to have to go back to town meeting. Is kind of the net result of that. They are waiting until a supermarket, a 68,000 square foot supermarket, is willing to sign a lease with them. And that lease is going to have a non-compete clause that will prevent us from also being cited at 129 Parker. Originally it was supposed to be a Market 32. Market 32 pulled out. The rumor now is that it's going to be a Market Basket. But we haven't heard any. Yay! We haven't heard an official announcement from Capital Group on that, but that's who they're talking to right now. So we are not going to go into 129 Parker. What's next? Oh, Powder Mill Road. Powder Mill Road is the development that's going in just up the street here. At no point were they considering retail, but just so you know, we did reach out to them, and we did that several times. Oh, you know, over however many months they've been working on it, 14 or 18 months. Just because it's, you know, we wanted to explore all the options, basically. The mill, and we have this listed here separate from the upper Sudbury lot. And again, the management company at the mill have been very friendly and very professional in our conversations with them. But what they have available right now, they have spaces that are interior to the mill. And then the other big factor with being in the mill is that all of their parking is first come, first serve. So if we were to take one of these spots, not only would we be kind of down a corridor, which is not ideal, but all of the people who had showed up to work that morning would already be parked in the first 10 or 15 rows of parking spots. And that's a non-starter for us. So that's the mill. And oh yeah, another Main Street site. And we're not gonna tell you which one. No, I'm sorry. The reason that we're not telling you which Main Street site it is because it was not listed and has not been listed on the open market. The building is occupied. There are businesses there with employees. And so we want to respect that building owner's privacy. But we got a lead that it was going to go for sale. And so this one we actually, I think, spent the most time on, and we worked the hardest on this one, because it would be great to be downtown. We did walk through that with the developer, and we had multiple conversations with that developer about what it would take to put a store in that building. And ultimately the developer decided that they couldn't make it work. They would have needed to turn it into a larger development than what the parcel could support, right? And have us as like an anchor tenant, right? So part of the draw, part of our sales pitch is that we are not going to pay you $30 a square foot in rent, but we are going to attract other businesses who want to co-locate with us, and they will pay you $30 a square foot, right? So we're trying to get people to work with our budget And so unfortunately, the developer for this property couldn't get a large enough development on that property with enough parking for us and the other tenants that they would need to make it a viable project for them on this one particular site. So we actually then looked at it, what would it take for us to develop it ourselves? And we also could not, we couldn't quite get it to work. We couldn't quite get the numbers to work based on their stated sales price, which we would have offered them less than that. But even offering them less, having reasonable assumptions, we think about what it would cost to then improve that property. We would essentially have needed to also turn it into a development where we had other tenants, which increases the cost, broadens the scope of the project tremendously, increases the risk, right? And then we're back to parking again. So if we have tenants, if we need the income from tenants for us to be able to afford to buy and renovate the space, now we need parking for our tenants. And I do now believe that that property owner is now speaking with another potential buyer. Let me consult my notes. Hang on just a moment. So that's the list. Now, as Lauren said, there's actually, believe it or not, I know it seems really hard to believe, there's actually still another site in Maynard. And that site actually just came on our radar fairly recently. And we've met with the landlord at that site, and we've had a preliminary conversation. And we just are in the process right now of getting a site-specific sales forecast for that site. And then we have to plug that into our pro forma and see where we go. So that is happening not today, because today we're here doing this, but it'll be tomorrow or next week, or so we will keep you in the loop as best as we are able. Can I have a thank you, sir? But just look, we're not signing. Well, people, I just want to be clear. I mean, honestly, it is our obligation, right? We have a fiduciary responsibility here. And I believe that in order to fulfill our responsibility, we have to know if there are other options outside of Maynard and how those options compare to the option that we are currently exploring in Maynard. Right? It doesn't mean that we wouldn't necessarily do the Maynard spot if we could get it to work. But we do want to be able to have an open and honest conversation about what it would take to make that Maynard spot work. And if there is another option somewhere else that is less expensive, for example, that would be really important information to share with you guys as well. So that's what's next for us. We're going to look just to see what the options are. Things do pop up, as Lauren said. Things do pop up. Like, I don't think people expected the Bank of America randomly to close and for that building to go for sale, but it did. And so something else could pop up. Our ears and eyes are always open. And if any of you have a suggestion, you can shoot us an email We do have owners do that occasionally, and we are happy to chase those down and look at that. Okay. I think I have one last slide or two. Oh yeah, let's talk about the capital campaign again. Why? Why am I talking about it? Because we always need to talk about it because it's coming. And also because it figures in how we evaluate potential sites, okay? There are a lot of moving pieces in the pro forma. So the lease rate, the cost per square foot, for example, is one piece. And part of the answer to the question of how much rent can we afford to pay, part of the answer is how much are we borrowing from the bank? And what is that debt payment? So as we evaluate sites, one of the questions that we can ask is, how much can we reasonably expect to raise in a capital campaign? And if we play with that number a little bit, does that make it possible for us to pay a slightly higher lease rate, for example? Right? Makes sense? And the answer to that question is really, it's up to you, right? So we do have member equity. That's everybody buying their ownership shares. That is not gonna get us a store, okay? We are gonna be applying for grants. We are gonna be applying for a bank loan, okay? And hopefully, as we negotiate a location, we will be able to get what's called a tenant improvement allowance from the landlord. So they will cover a portion of the cost of improving the property. And that remains to be seen what our tenant improvement allowance will be. And whatever we don't raise from all of the rest of these sources is going to come from owners from the capital campaign. I think I do have one more slide. Thank you, Jason. So this is a graphic that was created by Jacqueline Hanna of the Food Co-op Initiative. They are a nationwide nonprofit dedicated to helping food co-ops open. It's kind of amazing, right? And all of the support and advice and help that we get from them is free. Also amazing. So Jacqueline has put this slide together in talking to startups about running effective capital campaigns. And you can see here that typically between 20 and 25% of owners will invest during a capital campaign. And that average investment typically falls somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000. So if only 20% of us, and I say that because I will be participating, if only 20% of us participate, and our average investment is $3,000, then to raise $1 million, we actually need 1,667 owners, which is more owners than we have right now. However, if 25% of us participate, and the average investment is closer to $5,000, we can theoretically raise $1 million with just 800 of us. And we have more than 800 owners already. And as Lauren said earlier, it would be really great if we could get to 1,200 owners by the time we launch the capital campaign. Because if you figure 25% participation, but with an average loan of only $4,000, then with 1,200 owners, you would get 1.2 million, right? That would be it for me. I know that they always give me the fun job. Yeah, I think that is it for me. We're not doing an open question and answer session. However, we're here. We're here for another couple hours, actually. And so you can come don't grab the nominees. that doesn't seem fair. But any of the existing board members, please, absolutely come over. If we haven't met in person, introduce yourself and ask away. All right? I'm gonna bring it back to Lauren.
I wanted to just go over some initiatives that we're launching. You know, we are at the point, although it might not feel like it, but we have pens at the ready, figuratively, literally, to sign on an appropriate spot. If a spot looks good, we're ready to sign that lease contingency or purchase contingency. And what that means is that it is time, if not past time, to really engage as many owners as possible in creating a real hard and fast vision of the store that you want to create. That's one of the advantages of being a co-op, right? You get to have a say in everything from store design to products to programming to initiatives outside of those things. So we have 3 initiatives that I want to share with you right now pretty quickly. And at the end of my sharing these, I have sign-up sheets. If anyone, and I hope as many of you as possible will sign up, if any of you want to get involved in one of these 3 or more than one of these 3. I think they're pretty exciting, and they really, I think, will make, I know that over the past year, if not, 4 years, 5 years, it can be frustrating to not actually see the store, and this is a chance for you to actually feel good about seeing the store that you want to create come to fruition before we have signed on that. Because once we sign on a line, we want to have owner data and input to make the store that we want to have. So the first is we are assembling a store development committee. Okay, and I have Lauren here. You can see me afterwards. I'll be back there. The sign-up sheets are back there. But essentially, this under the umbrella of the design, or rather of the store development committee, are 2 tasks. The first is to organize a series of design charrettes, bringing as many owners in as possible to give their input into everything from, do you want an industrial look? Do you want something non-industrial? Do you want a huge prepared food section? All of those sorts of design elements, we want our owners to really spearhead those efforts. And part of that process is looking at other co-ops, both startup, the ones that are actually building their stores now, but also co-ops that have been around for a long time. And it's pretty fun to look at all of the possibilities for what we might have in our store. So we're looking for people to really take both leadership roles in that. I'll be facilitating, but both leadership roles in that, and also just coming to the meetings that you can come to give your input. That's one piece of the store development committee that we are assembling. The other piece is product and programming surveys, right? Way back when, and I'll show you the slides after the one slide after this, way back in the early conception phases of the co-op, we actually did ask a number of our early owners for, hey, what kind of food do you want? What kind of farms do you want? What kind of programming do you want? We still have that data, but it was in the days when we had maybe 100 owners, right? And we now have more than 1,000. And so it's time at this point to really get some hard, fast data. So we want to put together these product and programming surveys. This is everything from foods to farms that you want represented, to classes that you want, whether you want a kids cooking class or Indian food cooking, or if you want community programs that don't exist at other co-ops, or you look at other co-ops and you find, hey, this is a fantastic program they do, and I'll talk about one of those down here. We want all of that input. So we are looking for folks to, again, lead that effort and also just participate in that effort. And the idea here is to put out both meetings, but also to put out SurveyMonkey surveys to gather that data from folks who can't attend the meetings as well. So if you have any experience in SurveyMonkey or any of the surveying programs that are out there, or you just want to get involved, you don't have experience, but this is something that really is exciting to you. It is to me. I want to have a say in what's in my store. Please come and see me afterwards, and we'll have a sign-up sheet there, and we'll start to put together an initial meeting for that. The other big initiative that we're just starting to get rolling is what I call Mission Food Justice. For decades, food co-ops have had at their core the mission of increasing access to local healthy food for everyone. And many co-ops do that very well. Many co-ops don't. And it has been a challenge to live and achieve that mission as a co-op community. And so we have just started to roll out a few events, one of which is that the film A Place at the Table, which explores the root causes of hunger in the U.S. and what we can actually do about it. We have Jim Dwyer, who runs Numero Uno, which is a translation service in the area, who has volunteered and is helping us develop some bilingual promotions for Spanish-speaking communities out there. But we really need your help, right? I mean, I am one person. The board is 9 people, and we need to tap all of the resources we have in order to actually achieve this central piece of our mission. So that's everything from, yes, documentary films, panel talks. We're also working on a panel talk with the Worcester Food Policy Institute. I think I always forget the last piece of that, but getting folks to talk about equitable access to food and racial disparities in access to local healthy food. But also connecting with communities of color, whether that's through churches or other groups, connecting with minority-owned food businesses to make sure that we can support them and hopefully have them and their foods represented in the co-op. And translation services, nonprofit joint programming. I say here like Sacramento Food Co-op. The Sacramento Food Co-op is over 40 years old. It's out in Sacramento, California, and they have I forget what the program is called, but it is a free, they partner with a local nonprofit to be able to offer a free 2-month-long course for low-income families to learn cooking on a budget. And it's a fantastic program. And again, that is driven by that core principle of making the tent as big as possible, bringing as many folks in as possible, because that's what we're about. So if you want to get involved in any of these 3 initiatives, please, at the conclusion of the presentation, come on over, whether I'm back there or not. The sign-up forms are back there. And then sign up, and we'll get that started. And we'd love to have as many people participate as possible. That's what makes us a community, right? So that is that piece. I did just want to quickly show you, I guess not to prove to you, but we have the data from way back when. If you were involved in that back in 2013, 2014, the first kind of get-togethers to gather some owner input on what kind of farms and food and all that we wanted. So we've started to assemble this, but again, to be able to have it in an actual survey form and the data kind of aggregated and then put into proper categories would be hugely helpful. And what this essentially does is this informs the general manager when we hire that general manager to say, here are the farms that our owners want represented, here are the foods that they want, here are the gluten-free options that they want, here are the alternative to dairy products that they want, and when it comes time for the design charrettes, we feed that to our design consultant, all of the input from our owners, so that that design consultant can then help design a store that you had input in. So on day 1, we're ready to go with the products, programming, and all the rest that are important to you.